I am so delighted that we are having this panel. Three, I think, of the most impressive professionals that I have had the chance to work with, who all happen to be based here in LA. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to try to go in the trenches as much as we can. In some cases, we may ask them to change the names to protect the innocent. But we want this to really be a dynamic, interactive conversation. Those of you who are joining us online, please type your questions into the chat, and Rachel will monitor that and will let me know when we have time for questions. Looks like there's a few more people shuffling in. Sasha Strauss, you can get some food back there and come back here. But we're going to get started. So I just want to do brief introductions, and then we're going to dive right in. So on my far left, we have Jackie Lowy. Jackie is a partner at Sourced Intelligence, a private intelligence and consulting firm specializing in digital investigations, open source intelligence, training, and security consulting. Jackie is an IDF veteran. She was in OCETS, which is an amazing unit in the IDF. She's and has a lot of experience working with the intelligence community, with federal and local law enforcement. She is really our go-to investigative resource here at Miller Inc. We work together almost every day. Yeah. I have in the middle here, Mari Henderson. Mari is a partner at Quinn, Emanuel, and a former criminal prosecutor and on-air news reporter. I think one of the few people who has both of those things in her stable. And she has a really rare combination of both courtroom experience and savvy in front of the camera, and has helmed a lot of very high-stakes litigation. And she's a great partner. I'm really excited to have her insights here. We appreciate you being here today, Mari.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And finally, Vicki Chou. Vicki is a partner at Hueston, Hennigan. She's also a former, she's a former U.S. district attorney, U.S. attorney in the Central Districts of California. Sorry. Mari was a district attorney. Vicki was a U.S. attorney. She was a deputy chief, representing the United States in hundreds of criminal cases, including computer and internet fraud, intellectual property, money laundering, cryptocurrency, bank fraud, drug trafficking, and others. A totally brilliant attorney and friend, and really grateful that Vicki's here. So I want to start with a biographical question. So each of you has had multifaceted professional journeys. We just went through them. In government, business, media. Talk to us how that outside experience, that your previous career experience has shaped how you think about your work now, and how it helps you manage a crisis better. So we'll start with Jackie.
Sure. Thank you, Nate. Can you hear me? Okay, great. So I kind of fell into the job or the profession that I'm in now as an online investigator and intelligence professional. I did serve in the IDF as a K-9 handler on the bomb squad, which Nate mentioned. I know that doesn't have anything to do with what I'm doing now. A lot of people ask about, how did you transfer that to from the military to what you're doing now? Really didn't have anything to do with one another. So it was just by chance. Although I learned a lot from my military experience, I think that I take every day with me. I know that everybody here deals with crises. For me, I think usually I speak to people on their worst day. That's when they call me. That's when they call Nate. That's probably when they call you guys. First and foremost, after being in the military, it's kind of nice because it puts everything into perspective. Like, no one's dying. Shots aren't being fired. So we're all safe in a nice warm room. So I think that's like a first and foremost thing.
Amazing. Mari, why don't you talk to us a little bit about journalism to government to private practice at Quinn Emanuel?
Yes, so I started my career in journalism. I was a reporter for New York One News, the 24-hour cable station in New York. And I think because of my background in journalism, I can appreciate and understand the importance of a deadline and the importance of getting out a response quickly. Because, so often, let's say someone gets sued and the complaint makes news, you can't just wait 30 days to file your answer. The story is done by then. You need to keep up with the media cycle, and even more so with social media, it's even quicker than back in the day when I had my camera and my tripod and I went out and I did my hit for the 1 hour I had. I was on TV for. So, working with PR professionals in tandem with our team of lawyers to decide how are we going to respond to this, both in the press and in court, and how are we going to do it quickly, and how are we going to make sure that those two narratives speak to each other. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more. So having a background in journalism, I think, is very helpful in understanding both the court of law and the court of public opinion. And then I made my way to be a DA because I wanted as much trial experience as I could get, and I don't think there's any better place besides the district attorney's office or the U.S. attorney's office to do that. But working as a criminal prosecutor, working with victims, it was a very rewarding experience, and I think it's helpful to be able to see both sides. A lot of the work I do now is defense side, but I'm someone who worked with victims day in, day out, and so when it comes time to take the plaintiff's deposition, I come at it from a different side or a different experience than maybe others who have been longtime defense attorneys.
Vicki, you've been in charge of some of the most important cases for the U.S. government here in this district. A lot of responsibility, a lot of challenges, and how do you apply that now? I've seen it personally in all of our work together with clients, but how has that prepared you to be, defense counsel or counsel on a civil litigation?
And I'll just say, Nate, this panel is so amazing because among most populations, having been a former federal prosecutor working on cartel stuff makes me really interesting, but here I feel like I'm the least interesting of the group because your backgrounds are so just cool. So when my last job before leaving the U.S. Attorney's Office was, as you mentioned, a deputy chief, but it was for the general crime section, which is where all new prosecutors start. That's where you learn how to be a prosecutor and how you learn how to try a case. So it's characterized by very high volume and a lot of brand new folks who may be experienced attorneys but have never been a prosecutor. So as you can imagine, there were a lot of problems constantly, judges calling, things happening in trial, and also like when you're in that section, you're not dealing with multi-year investigations that lead to like the indictment of like Al Capone or something. You're dealing with like a buy-bust, or someone gets stopped at the airport with meth, and so there are problems to those cases that you don't necessarily see in a lot of federal cases. And so that really taught me you just have to figure out what the most, kind of like an ER, I mean, probably not as much under pressure as dealing with bombs, but some like figure out what's important, what can you do with that, and keep your calm, because it's not going to help anyone if you get really stressed out.
Totally. That speaks to me. My dad's an ER doc, and I definitely think some of his energy rubbed off on me, for better or for worse. We've all been through a lot of crises and navigated clients through a lot of crises. I'm wondering if we could go down the line and just talk about one crisis that you've worked on, the kinds of crises that you handle. Maybe just share one story from your practice that you think would be interesting for this group.
Sure. So with my background as a federal prosecutor, our crises often involve the feds. It could be someone wakes up at 6 a.m. and is surprised to have the feds at their door executing a search warrant. Maybe it's an arrest, maybe it's an indictment, maybe even a grand jury subpoena is a crisis for a lot of people who have never dealt with something like this. We also do complex civil litigation, so on that side it could be a whistleblower complaint, having to deal with that. Do you do an internal investigation? Are you concerned about the exposure that follows? It could be a very significant contract that's about to be breached, has been breached, that is going to challenge the viability of a project. It could be a business dispute where someone's threatening to make unsavory allegations. It could be any variety of things, many of which we've worked on together.
Exactly.
Yes, so because my background as a criminal prosecutor, a lot of the crises that I deal with are civil cases that have some sort of criminal element to it. And so if someone is making claims of sexual assault, We often get involved. I've done a lot of, because of that, employment-related cases. So if someone is accusing a company of racial discrimination or racial harassment, but I've also done things like if a company has, if there's an accident or something that happens and it makes front page news. And so one interesting case that I worked on, and it's a real kind of like crisis management within crisis management. It was an interesting case study. It was for a company that, an autonomous vehicle company that was operating in San Francisco, and a pedestrian got hit by a car, not by the autonomous vehicle. The pedestrian actually was crossing the street and got hit by a human driver, was struck by the human driver, and then landed on the hood of the AV. So the media went wild and said, the AV struck a pedestrian. That is a true crisis management experience. So the company, you need to deal with that false narrative and correcting that false narrative right now. So the company went into crisis mode and had to correct the narrative. It was not the AV that struck the pedestrian. They're speaking to media. They have regulators. They have stakeholders that they're dealing with. A true crisis. However, it turned out that the AV, while it did not strike the pedestrian, after stopping, dragged the pedestrian. And the question became, when did people in the company know that the AV dragged the pedestrian, and how did they respond? And so that's where we got involved, because the DMV pulled the license and suspended the license of the company to operate in San Francisco. And within 24 hours of the DMV suspending their license, we got the call. And so we went into crisis mode of trying to identify what they did wrong. And in 90 days, we turned around, we did a 200-page report where we had interviewed all of the witnesses. And I know this is probably gonna make people like you freak out. We agreed to waive privilege for a 30-day period, because most of the communications involved people in legal dealing with what they knew when. So in the middle of an open DOJ investigation, we waived privilege and did an entire report, because it was important to the company at that time to re-earn and regain the trust of the public, of the DMV and other regulators. And so it was really a fascinating experience. We were able to secure a very rare deferred prosecution for the company and get them out of that situation. So you're all able to see the public report. I'm not sharing anything that's not confidential, but really an interesting case study in crisis management.
Wow. So that report was all the difference for the company, and your ability to come in quickly, see it, understand what's most important. I think that's often the case. Like, when you're in a crisis, there's lots of things that are important, but understanding where's the salience here, and this is going to be the least bad outcome. I think it's a really, really interesting case study.
Yeah.
Jackie, do you have a case study from your work where, when you guys got involved, there was a key decision point like that, where something like really had to make a difference? Like,
Yeah, I think it's one that we worked on together, Nate, pretty recently. But firstly, for what I deal with, there's no typical case. So it could be a bot attack against a singer, or it could be someone who's it was included in an AI video taking supplements, or it really can be anything. Business due diligence, fraud, litigation, discovery, really anything A to Z. But the one that I'm talking about, or thinking about at least, is something that made a difference. Is this client came to us, a big reputational risk incident happened, and there was a team of like 10 people, and they were obsessed and looking at their phones and TikTok and Twitter and Snapchat and every single social media platform that you could think of. And within their own echo chamber, all they were seeing is negative press about them, or negative sentiment and reputational damage. And I think something that really changed it was, again, this kind of comes from my first answer, is that first stage, you always have to look at it and analyze it, and that will dictate phase 2, and that will dictate next steps. And so that's really the first step, is to analyze what's actually going on. So we had this company, big reputational incident happened, and all they were seeing is negative sentiment. And then once we did our analysis, pulling tons and tons of data over tons of social media platforms, and showing metrics and numbers, that translates a lot better to the client. So they obviously think that they're having the worst day, this is going to tank the company. But when you zoom out and you see, okay, well, maybe it's not going viral, or maybe, only 15% of what's coming out about that brand is negative, or even more so, and that 15%, it's very inorganic, right? It's not real users. It's potentially coming from Iran or China or Russia or South America. It's not even real users, right? So I think that is a turning point, and that kind of calms people down when they see metrics that translate into, is this really a crisis, or is this really, kind of benign? Is this really hurting sales? Is this really, making people go to the store and not pick your product? So I think that's, a huge part of what I deal with.
Absolutely. Jackie was so invaluable on that case. This client was screaming at us every day. The scariest thing in a crisis is when someone says to you, we have to do something. That's often not true. Sometimes doing nothing is a lot better than doing something. But there's this feeling where people feel this pressure, and it's compounded by what happens online. And I always have to tell people Twitter isn't real life. And it's hard to convince a client sometimes that what's in their algorithm is not what all their customers are seeing. And it's hard to say, well, how is this really affecting sales? Or, do we have legal exposure or criminal exposure? So having someone like Jackie to come in and put together a report where we can say really clearly, like, actually, not that many people are seeing this, despite what you believe.
Just to add something, it's really hard because in my line of work, I'd say like a majority of the time, the best thing to do is sit and wait, right? And you could probably attest to this, Mari, about like, let's just wait for the next name to come out or the next news story to come out to, push your results down. And it's really hard for people to do nothing, but many times that's the best course of action.
Yeah, this comes up a lot. I'm sure this is your experience too with criminal investigations, where your feeling is, I want to be out from under this, like, let's go and talk to them and let's try to get a declination. But sometimes it's better to wait and let things develop. And oftentimes if you go to them right away before they've even started looking at anything, you're not going to get a positive answer. You might just attract attention. And so there's always that, like,
It's exactly it. I had a very high-profile client call me 2 weeks ago. He'd received a letter from someone seeking a settlement, and he's like, I feel like I can just go talk to the attorney and explain to them how much I admire their work and what a good guy I am, and like they're gonna get it, and like and like that's gonna really be the best approach. And I was like, yeah, I don't think that's gonna work, but but a lot of our work up here as counselors, just helping people, advising them against their worst instinct. I want to transition. I have a question for our two attorneys. I'll tell you, when I ended my career as an Israeli diplomat about 15 years ago, when I was at the UN, I had famous, let's say, battles with our legal department, because everything you write at the UN is technically it's international law, and the lawyers would often, I was kind of under their thumb, right? I would write a speech. And we had our legal advisor was very verbose, and English was not her first language, but she really believed it was. And she would use a lot of like legal justifications to change everything I wrote, and it drove me crazy. So my boss at the time, the ambassador, thought it was really funny that I was marrying an attorney. So in my good bet, he threw a party for me, and the letter he wrote, he said, "I'm sure after your experience working with our esteemed legal department, you're going to have a life of marital bliss." And but I do think it was really good training for marriage in my current profession, to have to work with attorneys and understand kind of the trade-offs. And oftentimes it's like you have to understand that the legal matter, especially when you're dealing with like a criminal case, it's just going to overrule any PR considerations. And there's sometimes when the PR consideration actually should overrule the legal consideration. So I'm wondering if we both work together. So I'm wondering if you guys can comment on how do you weigh legal risk versus reputational risk, and how do you work within the constraints of the kind of crazy media environment we all live in now?
I mean, I do understand that you can't wait, like I said, until the deadline to file a case, or deadline to file a response, because the battle's already been lost by then. And so you have to think about, what can I do in the moment to respond? However, sometimes people are quick to want to get out a narrative or accept responsibility and accept ownership and apologize. But I'm thinking down the line of, okay, if there's a story today that says, you're right, we were the cause of the fire, and I'm so sorry to all of the people that this happened to. Well, 2 years from now, when I'm defending that person in deposition, what's the first exhibit they get shown in their deposition is the press statement from 2 years earlier. And there you've admitted causation, you've admitted liability, and so what do you do at that point? And so those are the kind of the balance, the risks that I'm balancing in needing to respond in the moment, and needing to salvage what you can with your various stakeholders, with the public, with the media, with government and regulators, and how that will impact a case later on.
Yeah, and one of the things that I like about working with you, actually, which I always tell my colleagues, is that you do respect, especially in a criminal case, the need to sort of prioritize the legal case and think about that. And so there's also ways to think about, I think that's a really good summary, Amari, of the risks that you have to balance, but you can also think about how can you use the litigation in a way that's helpful, because there is litigation privilege, and there are filings that you have to do, and there are also filings that you can think about, well, should we bring a motion? And you can think about if that's a good vehicle to be making some of your PR points.
It's such a great vehicle, absolutely. Legal filings are protected from defamation most of the time, so it's just like when lawyers are writing their briefs, it's always much easier for a reporter to report on as alleged in a filing versus reporting something fresh, because it insulates them from that defamation risk, and it's a really great thing. I want to talk about AI. I think no panel today is complete without talking about AI. I think AI is already hugely disruptive in our space. I think it's going to be even more so. How are you guys using AI tools, and when where do you see it adding value, and what are some of the challenges associated with AI that we see?
Can I start with the warning about AI?
Yes.
So Mari made the point, which I think is a very important one, about be mindful of what you're saying during crisis. Also be mindful of what you're talking to your AI about during crisis, because there are now developing court cases. There was one in SDNY, I think there was one in Delaware, where discussions with AI asking what to do in a particular situation were considered to not be privileged, even though the person claimed that he was treating AI kind of like a lawyer, which AI is not a lawyer. And so, but like now these days, with everyone using AI for everything, it's, I think, a very natural impulse just to reach out to the AI and say, what should I do about this? But keep in mind that anything you're feeding it could come back.
Remember the discoverability of your conversations with an AI chatbot.
Yeah.
When Slack was introduced, I am not on Slack, and when my colleagues want to Slack me, and I'm like, no, I have seen too many cases where people are just too casual and too informal in what they say in the moment in Slack, and those are always the most damning exhibits are Slack. And now the most damning exhibits are your conversations with your with ChatGPT.
Yeah, so check your document preservation policies.
And also the data security aspect of it. That's where I'm coming from as well. For the digital privacy, never put in your social security number, or never put in reports that you're working on that have personally identifiable information, or connecting it to your systems as well. That's a big part of it.
I do have to share an interesting development, though, with AI now, is people are actually leaning into it as their defense. I have a case where we sued someone for defamation, and in his response in arguing, well, I wasn't acting with reckless disregard for the truth, because when I accused that person of a crime, I first asked ChatGPT. And in their declaration was a copy and paste of ChatGPT's response of, oh yeah, this person committed a crime.
Wow.
And it's what a dangerous precedent that is. You know, I could ask ChatGPT, oh, is my mom guilty of RICO? And ChatGPT, I'm sure, could come up with some form of a response. So, you know, it's interesting times for sure.
And given how ChatGPT is, you know, it's totally obsequious, so it's going to tell you whatever you want to hear.
And hallucinate.
That's true too. Folks online, feel free to put your questions into the chat, and I think we're coming close to our questions. And folks here start thinking we have one more here. I love this question. You all seen crises that didn't have to be as bad as they were. What's the single biggest mistake organizations make before a crisis hits, and what should they be doing right now while things are calm to be better prepared?
Call Nate and make a plan.
That's an interesting question. I think something that we've, you know, it's a common theme that we've spoken about over the past 20 minutes is don't react, you know, off gut reaction. So I think first, data to support whatever your next phase is going to be. Like, usually the reports that I provide to my clients, it's giving them more data to make sounder decisions, right? Or the more information you have, the better your decisions are going to be. So I'd say collect as much data as possible. You don't need to react right away. I think preventatively, I work a lot in the digital privacy space. So preventatively knowing what's out there about you, your company, your entity, your family is very important, because when stuff goes wrong, that's what people go after. So making sure your personally identifiable information is offline, making sure that your socials are private, making sure that you audit your socials for something that you put on Twitter in 2012 is very important. So knowing the environment beforehand is an amazing preventable step in going forward. And also it helps Nate whenever, you know, you have a client and you want to understand what's out there and what's vulnerable and what can be used against you. Just honing that in is a huge first step.
I just want to do a brief PSA on this, because Jackie puts together these reports that are unbelievable. You have no idea the information about you that's on the internet, on the dark web.
And a lot of people say, oh, I don't have Instagram, I don't have Twitter, I'm not on social media. Those are the people that have the most out there. It's, you know, anything from what your Wi-Fi is named at your house, how you lease your cars, interior photos of your house on Zillow. Really, it's anything A to Z, and it's out there for anyone to grab.
So if you haven't had, and there are lower cost solutions to this, but Jackie does an unbelievable job in getting stuff taken off the internet, and it is like so often we find the thing that we could have done fairly inexpensively before it becomes very expensive once it's out and you're in the middle of the crisis. Mari.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking this goes back to our conversation about AI. As I had a case where we were representing the plaintiff in suing someone who was posting things online that were defamatory, and one of the things they also posted online was promoting a deep fake pornographic video of the person. Mm-hmm. And now they part of their defense was, well, I took it down, but you only took it down after you live streamed and said, let me tweet about this, and let me see how many views are posted.
Wow.
And so that was actually the first, at least known, verdict in Florida for prosecution of promoting a deepfake image online. And the interesting thing about that statute is there's fee shifting as well. And so, you know, the laws are catching up with, it takes time, but the law does catch up over time with new technology, with AI, and with revenge porn, we've seen law catch up there as well in terms of what people are posting, what people are disseminating. And so to Jackie's point, I'm sure it's very important to scrub, but you know, things are on there forever. And the first thing I do as a defense attorney is when we get a demand letter from someone wanting to sue, we immediately check all of their social media, we preserve it, because, you know, any inconsistent statement, anything that they say can and will be used against them.
All right, I want to turn it to the audience now for some questions.
Hi, I'm Oren. My personal Wi-Fi is Bruno's Palace, so make of that what you will. And also, a dog handler in Oakets, that's a pretty badass job. That's not like, I don't know what I know as a dog handler here, so kudos to you. The best piece of advice I ever got from a crisis manager personally was not to make decisions based off of fear. Actually, I don't know if it's the best piece of advice, but it's an interesting one. I'm curious what you guys think of that.
I think that's good advice, and actually, I was not fully joking when I said make a plan, because just in the cases that we've dealt with, when you're talking about, we've had 2 cases where there were indictments, and one, there was a plan, and one, they didn't make a plan until after that had already happened, and there isn't really enough time once people start reporting it, there's been an arrest or an indictment to like be able to react quickly enough. But the fear point, I think, is applicable here, because a lot of people are, if you hear about someone getting indicted, that's a time of fear, but not all cases are going to end up with really bad outcomes, and you still have to think about if it's a business, like how the business is going to go on. And so from that perspective, it makes sense to think about, like, how do we plan for the future? How do we still make sure that people are engaged? How do we make sure that the business still continues and not just react out of, okay, there's the possibility of some federal jail time at the end of this?
I would also say if you don't react out of fear, it will save you quite a bit of money on the financial end. And I could tell you what all of us do kind of cost a lot of money. So I think also when I speak to my clients, like, yeah, we could do everything that you're talking about, and carpet bomb the whole internet and save everything. But I think if you react not out of fear, you're way more intentional with your next steps. And also, again, I have to bring up the financial point, because it will save you a lot on the back end.
Yeah, I just think coming up with a plan and being precise about it. Oftentimes, when we're getting ready to announce a settlement, the company is getting nervous about how that'll come out and the PR of it. But if you come up with a plan, like, I don't know if you've had this experience, but we often try to announce the settlement on the Friday before a 3-day holiday weekend. So, and we're pretty good about getting prosecutors to agree with us that nothing will be announced until then, and timing it out. So coming up with a plan rather than reacting in fear in haste.
Sasha.
Thanks. First of all, congrats to the Miller Inc. community for putting this awesome event on. So I'm a big fan of AI. I call myself a technosexual. And I'm I'm working on I'm a brand strategist, and I got asked to be an expert witness on a project, and they had 2,000 pieces of discoverable evidence. So I asked the lawyer, what do you want me to do? You want me to comb through this every single piece? And she said, no, use AI to do an evaluation and do a side-by-side comparison. So I gave her the thumbs up. So I guess my question is, we have lots of critiques of AI. Is there an example of a positive use, a benefit to you or your clients that you can share with us?
I think that is the best use of AI, is combing through very large amounts of data. I have a civil business dispute case, hundreds of millions of dollars in damages, and we asked the AI tool that was part of the discovery database to look for evidence that the other side was committing fraud. And this would take associates days, weeks, months to comb through, and the AI had 5 pieces of evidence that we hadn't seen before that supported theory of fraud.
From a research perspective, it's just so incredible, because we are in a situation often where we have an immediate, you get parachuted into a case. There's a whole bunch of context and background and you need to, we often have to move within a day or 2 days or 3 days. And the ability to sift through all the information, engage with AI. AI is not going to figure it out on its own, but it's a really great sparring partner and tool to pull all that information into actionable insights, and then actually put it into a pitch ready deck for a reporter or for another audience that you need to communicate to. It's totally transformative from our view.
I've heard that you have to be very stern with your AI, though. because it likes to give you things that are helpful to you. You have to chide it when it gives you bad information. Like, I could lose my job. I could really get in trouble. You got to stop doing this.
I'm going to start doing that.
So there are a lot of professionals here and people watching. Obviously, each one of you individually and with the organizations that you're part of have sterling reputations. You're working with people who may not. And I'm wondering how you continue to work with all of the people who deserve your support, your counsel, and also have, a way of bifurcating who you work with and who you are as professionals.
I guess I can answer that one. Yeah, we've had a lot of questionable cases. I think when I was starting the business, you have a little bit less of a luxury to kind of choose your clients. I think it's really important to have those internal discussions and have that moral compass and try to calibrate what you're going to take on, what you're not going to take on, through what channels. If a big, legitimate law firm is coming to me for a criminal case on the side of the defendant and asking for discovery or investigation, I mean, everybody in the world should be, deserves the just process, right? So that's something I would potentially take on. But if it's coming through kind of like a weird channel and you don't have privilege and all of that kind of stuff, I just think you have to kind of look internally and say, is this something that we want to work with or it's not? And that is definitely, and also liability, plays a big part of that too. But I've learned from Nate also that sometimes, because I actually call Nate when I have these discussions, and that sometimes he said, not all press is bad press. So, or what's the saying? All press is good press. So you just kind of have to be have those internal discussions and see if you want to take on the work or not.
I will say, so long as the client listens to my advice, that is the most important thing. I tell them, no idea is a bad idea. Please come to me with your ideas, because I don't know what it's like to be falsely accused of something horrific. I don't know what it's like, and I understand that can, consume you. And so I very frequently wake up to multiple emails at 5 a.m. Well, what about doing this? Could we surveil them? Or what if I hire a reporter to write a book and expose them? And I'll listen to, I will listen to all of your ideas, but you need to make sure to not do anything that is against my advice that will harm the case, because I'm looking at the big picture. You might be thinking about tomorrow. I'm thinking about your deposition and your trial that, at least in LA Superior, isn't going to happen for 2.5 years from now at the earliest. And so as long as you listen to my advice, that's the most important thing.
Anything to add now?
Yeah, I think that's a really good guideline, and also, as long as I always feel that I'm comfortable with the representations that I'm making, right, that's the most important thing, and we have an ethical duty for that.
I always think about, we do have hard lines around the folks that we represent, and I turn away cases, I do. And when I do work with folks, we, assuming that, I feel like it's not too big a reputational risk for us, or don't feel conflicted about the case. We have 3 main rules. You have to pay your bill. You can't abuse me or my staff, and you can't ask us to do anything remotely illegal. And if people, and no gray area, just nope, this is our hard rule. And the minute that somebody breaks one of those rules, usually it's the first one, but it depends. Then we no longer represent them. And I think you when you're in this business, you have to understand, you have to have lines, otherwise it becomes very hard. And there's been some really high-profile cases recently of PR folks who have become the story because they've sort of gotten involved in things, and I think it's really important that we are not the story and that we work to try to kind of maintain that.
And secure communication.
Security, that's true too. The fourth rule, which is a 3+, is you have to tell me the truth or tell me everything, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes you get different versions, evolving versions of the truth. I think we have time for one more question.
It sounds like a lot of the problems come from the emotional reaction of the client in the crisis and their impulse, as Nate said, to do something and do something quickly. How do you, for lack of a better term, calm the client down and help them to understand, I am not emotionally involved. I've been through this many times. Let me handle this and figure out what to do. Don't respond. Don't react. When people are in a crisis, I think the tendency to want to react is very strong. So how do you advise them? How do you get them to calm down? How often do they listen to you? And then I have a second question, which is more, how the heck do we protect ourselves on digital privacy, like when we don't have a $20,000 or $50,000 firm working on our behalf?
Tips, definitely Google yourself, understand what's out there. There are off-the-shelf solutions. I would definitely have a junk email address and a junk phone number that when you sign up for a Starbucks rewards card, like that's what you use. Password manager, really good. VPN if you can. Two-factor authentication, huge. All accounts should have that. And then we can talk after about kind of how to get a lot of that off. But it's a process, and the quality and quantity of data that's circulating right now is absolutely insane, and it makes my life and my job much easier. But it's scary. So we could talk afterward.
How do you I've seen everyone on this stage calm clients down. How do you guys do it? What are some of your tricks?
In talking a client off the ledge, oftentimes I'll say, listen, like the truth will prevail. The facts will come out. And so, the most important thing is to get the evidence on your side. And so if a complaint comes out and they're publicly accused of something awful, well, let me get your phone. Let's preserve your phone. Let's get all the communications. I know what you're telling me is true, and I know that there's going to be communications that blow their story out of the water. So let's just wait, because before we react, the most important thing is to come to, and I'm sure you'll agree, like if you come to a reporter not just with a statement, but with, and here's the receipts to prove it. Here are the text messages where this guy is asking me for money, hitting me up for money all the time, and now is turning around and claiming, something awful happened. It's those receipts that are so important. So give us the time to comb through, and maybe with the use of AI, I can do it even quicker. But give me the time to gather the evidence, because that will speak much louder than, a BS complaint by a plaintiff's attorney who shall remain unnamed.
And part of what you were touching on there, which it really is something that we employ a lot, is I think clients want to know that you are working on something, not that you are not doing something because you're not prepared. And so we can do a lot of preparation, right? Like gather documents, analyze the law, put together memos, and let them know, look, we have a full command of the situation, right? I'm not saying to you, we're never going to do this, just let's take a beat.
Thank you. I think with that, we're going to conclude our panel of these. I really want to thank these three badass women for joining us today. We're grateful to have each of you in our network, and that you guys took the time, which I know you all have crazy matters going on, to come and share insights with our team and with the broader Miller Inc. community. And thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.